All right. Shalom, everyone. It's me, Brother Doug, with my sister Sadie and my sister River, and we're the Wakened by Yahuwah Fellowship Group in Yahuwah Almighty and Yahushua Messiah. Today, we're going to be continuing our Torah readings that we do during the week. So today will be our first Torah reading of the week, and we're going to start with Genesis 49. So we're going to continue here, and let me just get there. So pretty much we're at the last two chapters of Genesis. If we get both of these done today, we'll be pretty much done. So here we go. It says, and Yaakov called his sons and said to them, assemble yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in the last days. So you see the LXXE, okay? And then you got the Targum on the right. Just want to explain there. So I'm using a parallel Bible feature on the word software. So the Onkelos here, Septuagint here. So pretty much the same thing. I actually like that the Targum of Onkelos says the end of days. So it makes it just a tad bit more specific there. Okay. So this is an end times prophecy in the book of Genesis. Wow. Really? All the way back in the beginning, kind of what Yahuwah, always says. He tells the end from the beginning, okay? So says, let's see here. Assemble yourselves that I may tell you what shall happen in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear me, sons of Yaakov. Hear Yasharal. Hear your father. And then it says in the Onkelos, assemble and hearken, O sons of Yaakov, and receive instruction from Yasharal, your father. Now that's important. Instruction, maybe talking about Torah there. Okay. Verse 3, Reuben, you, my firstborn, thou, my strength, and the first of my children, hard to be endured and self-willed. Yeah, this doesn't sound good. The Onkelos has a little bit more, which is kind of interesting. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, and the beginning of my power. Yours should have been take the three portions, the birthright, the priesthood, and the kingdom. But because you have proceeded perversely. Now, let me explain what the Targum's alluding to here. Reuben uncovered his dad's nakedness, okay? So what his dad's actually saying is, because you took my wife for yourself, all this stuff is being stripped from you. The priesthood is stripped from you. The three portion of inheritance, basically. So you got the birthright, the priesthood, and the kingdom. That's probably why it gets later divided to, I think, Levi takes the priesthood. So this is kind of like a foreshadowing show another tribe would have the priesthood. And the kingdom, probably Judah. And birthright, I would say Ephraim, if I remember correctly. So that got divided, I think. Later on, you'll see that got divided in three different areas. Okay, so you were insolent like water, burst not forth with violence, for you went up to the bed of your father. Then you defile the couch, whereupon you went up. See? Yeah, defile the bed. Remember how Paul says in the New Testament, brothers, this should not be so. You do things that even the Gentiles would not do. Like having his father's wife. Okay, so bed defiled is referring to whoring and most likely referring to adultery. Okay. Behold, as water outpoured, you will not prosper, neither will you receive the excellent portion, because you went up to your father's place of sleeping. Then, my son, did you become profane when you went up to my bed? So the Targum kind of gives you a more literal idea of what happened. Okay, so here we go. Simeon and Levi, brothers, accomplish the right ruling of their cutting off. And then Targum says, Simon and Levi are brothers, mighty men in the land of their sojourning. They did mightily. That's a little weird. I kind of like the Septuagint on that verse. They're accomplishing right ruling, you know. So kind of like the LXXE on that one. All right, so let's go to the next verse here. Hold on. Of course, my stupid scroller does that sometimes. Just bear with me, guys. All right, here we go. Verse 6, let not my being come into their counsel, and let not my inward parts contend in their conspiracy. For in their wrath they slew men, and in their passion they huffed a bull. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's referring to Dinah here, how they acted very angrily, and because their sister Dinah was defiled by that Hittite guy. Okay, so I think that's what the LXX version of verse 6 is referring to. Not let not my being come into their counsel, let not my inward parts contend in their conspiracy, for in their wrath they slew men. Yeah. Onkelos says, my being was not in their secret, into their company to come. I would not have descended from mine honor, for in their anger they slew a slaughter, and in their willfulness they raised the wall of their enemy. That's interesting. Raised the wall of their enemy. It's an interesting phrase there. Okay, you got verse 7. Cursed be their wrath, says the Septuagint, for it was willful, and their anger, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Yasharel. Could he be foreshadowing the diaspora there? I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Scatter them. Verse 7 in Onkelos says, accursed was their anger, for it was strong, and their wrath, for it was relentless. I will divide them in Jacob, and I will scatter them in Yasharel. Very interesting. Oh boy, here comes one of my favorite parts. Here we go. Judah, Yehuda. Yehuda, your brother, has praised you, and your hands shall be on the back of your enemies. Your father's sons shall do you reverence. Okay, so Onkelos says, Yehuda, you are praised and not shame. Your brother shall praise you. Your hand shall prevail against your enemies. Your enemies shall be dispersed. They will be turned backward before you, and the sons of your father will come before you with salutations. Yeah. I'm going with the Septuagint on that one. Reverence sounds a lot better than salutations. My goodness. That's kind of a little watered down for the Onkelos there. Let's see here. Verse 9. Yehuda is a lion's whelp. So now we're getting to the symbolization of Yehuda being a lion. Okay. From the tender plant, my son, you are gone up, having couched, thou liest as a lion, and as a whelp, you shall stir him. Who shall stir him up? Now, the Onkelos on the other side here says, the dominion shall be yours in the beginning. Oh boy, this is why I like the Onkelos here. And in the end, the kingdom shall be increased from the house of Yehuda, because from the judgment of death, my son, have you withdrawn. He shall repose and abide in strength as a lion, and as a lioness. There shall be no king that may cut him off. Interesting. Now, verse 10, I'm pretty sure us that know the New Testament know who this is referring to. Okay. A ruler shall not fail from Yehuda, nor a prince from his loins, until there come the things stored up for him. And he is the expectation of nations. Like, the Psalms by those Christian Psalms, hope of nations. Okay. All right, so this is obviously talking about Yahusha, okay? The Onkelos has a little bit extra here. It says, he who exercises dominion shall not pass away from the house of Yehuda, nor the Sephirah, probably talking about the scepter, from his children's children forever, until, I should highlight this right here, the Messiah come, who is the kingdom, and unto whom shall be the obedience of the nations, or whom the peoples shall obey. And then it continues on about Yahusha here, binding his foal to the vine, the donkey to the vine, the foal of his donkey to the branch. He shall wash his robe in wine. Okay? All you have to do is go to Isaiah 66, chapter 66, verses 2 to 3, and you'll figure that out, the connection there. Okay? So, his garment in blood of the grape. This is talking about treading the winepress. When Yahusha comes back, the day of Yahuwah, he's going to tread his robe in the blood of grapes. So, and also you can find, I think it's in Revelations chapter 19, verse 13. You can find another cross-reference in the New Testament where it's fulfilled, where he is his clothes are dipped in blood. Okay. All right, and the Onkelos of verse 11, Yasharal shall pass round about in his cities. The people shall build his temple. They will be righteous round about him and be doers of the law through his doctrine. Of tubely purple will be his raiment, his vesture of crimson wool with colors. So yeah, they put in Israel there to make you think it's talking about the person Israel, but the person Israel never got a vesture dipped in blood. So that could have been a bias at that time to try to not take something away from that would be talking about the promised Messiah and try to attach it to Israel. So again, that's just something to keep in mind. So that they might have been already trying to change the messianic prophecies and stuff like that. Or sometimes the Messiah is referred to as Israel in prophetic terms. Sometimes, sometimes Yahushua in prophecy is referred to as David. In future end times prophecy, we're talking about, the tabernacle of David will be reestablished and stuff like that. It will even say they will have one king, David. But we know that David is not going to be the king in the kingdom, according to the New Testament. So, yeah, so that doesn't trip me up too much that it says Israel there. It's either one of two things. Either whoever translated the Targum of Onkelos added it in there, or they started messing with the messianic prophecies around that time. Because you had some people that were in the synagogues that didn't like the fact that this is referring to a coming Messiah that obviously Yahushua would fulfill. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on, I actually like the Septuagint version of verse 11 better. Okay, so verse 12 says, his eyes shall be more cheering than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. Okay, it says in verse 12 of the Onkelos, his mountains shall be red with his vineyards, and his hills be dropping with wine. His valleys shall be white with grain and flocks of sheep. And I've explained before, if you look into the old British language, corn doesn't always refer to what we think of as corn today. It's any type of grain. So just want to explain that, because I know some people are probably looking at my screen like, why did he say grain when it says corn? It's the same thing. In the old British language, corn was any type of grain. So anyway, so here we go. Now we're up to Zebulun here. And you know what? Just for the heck of it, let me go to my Kindle real quick. I'm curious to see if all of the Targums say Israel in that verse 11. I would not be surprised. I want to go to the earliest Targum I have of the Pentateuch and see if that's the case. That's usually the best way to do it. If that's really legit, it should be in the earliest Targum then. The tricky thing about the Targums is not all of them were dated back to the time of the captivity in Babylon. Some of them were one of the Targums, like the Targum of Jonathan, I think most scholars would say is early 1st century AD, which would have been close to about 900 years after the Septuagint. So we got to keep that in mind too, that not all the Targums were from the time of Daniel. Only some of them were. So from what I've looked up, this Jerusalem Targum should have been from earlier. So let's see here. Let's go to verse 11. Yeah, see, no mention of Israel. No mention of Israel. See? Binding his loins and going forth to war against them, that hate him. Remember how it says in the book of Luke? How it says, those that did not worship me, I will slay. Okay? Binding his loins and going forth to war against them that hate him. He will slay kings with princes and make the rivers red with the blood. And this is the Jerusalem Targum for anyone that's curious. With their slain and his hills white with the fat of their mighty ones. I kind of like that. So it's probably talking about destroying their idols. His garments will be dipped in blood, and he himself be like the juice of the winepress. Okay, you can get a better idea who it's talking about here. Okay, so again, the earliest Targum that I know of agrees with the Septuagint. I just want to show you guys that. Okay, so the Onkelos one, who knows? They could have been adding in Israel there. That could have been something added in that's not even in the manuscript. You know, the translator could have selfishly added it in. So just be careful when you read this stuff, because like I said, not all of them date back to the 70 years of Daniel. Some of them are later. So you do have a bias in 1st century AD with the synagogues that they would want to erase Yahusha from certain prophecies. So, yeah. Like I said, yeah, most likely they added Israel there. Yeah. Okay. So, anyway. So I just wanted to make that clear. And we know that it should be talking about Yahusha because that's how it's worded in the Septuagint also. The Septuagint's the earliest Old Testament we have to date, other than, you know, a few of the Targums, one or two of the Targums that might have been around Daniel's time period, which we pretty much don't know for sure that they were around Daniel's time period. That's the legend of the Targums, that one of them, which I believe the Jerusalem one, because it's extremely fragmented, probably was around the time of the Daniel captivity, so in Babylon. But anyway, let's continue here. Zabulon shall dwell on the coast, and he by a haven of ships, and shall extend to Sidon. Zebulun will dwell near the haven of the sea. He will subdue princes with ships, and will eat the good of the sea, and his boundary shall come unto Sidon. Issachar has desired that which is good, resting, between the inheritances. Issachar, rich in substance, will have his heritage between the boundaries. Okay, so pretty much the same thing there. Zebulun has a little bit more on the Onkelos, talking about subduing the provinces with ships. He will eat the good of the sea, and the boundary shall come unto Sidon. Now, Sidon, just for anyone that doesn't know, that's Tyre. Okay, same thing as Tyre. So it's very interesting that Zebulun's going to be like, he's almost having trade with a pagan nation, which is kind of interesting, or his boundary would extend to this pagan nation of Tyre, maybe taking over Tyre possibly. But it talks about ships and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. Issachar, verse 14, has desired that which is tube, resting between the inheritances. Issachar, rich in substance, will have his heritage between the boundaries. Same thing, okay. And having seen the resting place that it was to, and the land that it was fertile, he subjected his shoulder to labor and became a husbandman. Huh. Interesting. He's seen his portion that it was tube, and the land that it was fruit bearing will subdue the provinces of the people and disperse their inhabitants. And they who remain of them will become servants to him and bringers of tribute. Okay, that makes a little bit more. I actually like how the Onkelos says verse 15. That makes a little bit more sense. The Septuagint is kind of vague there, talking about the land was fertile and he subjected his shoulder to labor. His shoulder to what? He subjected his own shoulder to labor? Like, I don't know. Targum makes a little bit more sense in that aspect. Okay. So now we're going to verse 16, Dan. Dan shall judge his people as one also in Yasharal. And then it says here on Kalos, from the house of Dan will be chosen, and will arise a man in whose days his people shall be delivered, and in whose years the tribes of Yasharal have rest together. Now, this is interesting. I would have to look it up, but what tribe did Samson come from? I wonder if he came from Dan, because this would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense, because obviously we know the Messiah doesn't come from Dan, so it's not talking about that. Okay. So, verse 17 here. And let Dan be a serpent in the way, besetting the path, biting the heel of the horse, and the rider shall fall backward. I always got creeped out by that. It sounds similar to Satan almost, like, or the same spirit is in him, because Satan's supposed to bite the heel of Messiah. The seed of Satan's supposed to bite his heel, and Yahushua's supposed to stomp on his head. The Onkelos says, a chosen man will arise from the house of Dan, the terror of whom shall fall upon the peoples. Yep, I actually like the Onkelos here. This is talking about Samson. A chosen man will arise from the house of Dan, the terror of whom shall fall upon the peoples, who will smite the Philistines with strength as the serpent, the deadly serpent lurking by the way. He will slay the mighty of the Philistines' army, the horsemen with the foot. He will weaken the horses and chariots and throw their riders backward. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense if you read the story of Samson in Scripture. Okay, that's what it's talking about. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Waiting for the salvation of Yahuwah. For your salvation have I waited, Yahuwah. It's phrased almost the same. Then we got Gad here. A plundering troop shall plunder him, but he shall plunder him, pursuing him closely. From the house of Gad will armed armies go over Yardena. So I guess that's talking about the Jordan. Before their brothers to the battle, and with much substance will they return unto their land. So I guess that's talking about plundering their enemies. Okay. Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield dainties to princes. Strange. The land of Asher will be good, or will be tube, and he shall nourish the dainties of kings. Interesting. Nephthalim is spreading stem, bestowing beauty on its fruit. In a tube land will the lot of Naphtali be cast, and his inheritance be fruitful. Over them will they give praise and benediction. Now, it's very interesting. It's a little bit more expounded upon there. So he's going to have a fruitful inheritance. This tube land will be in his inheritance. They will give praise and benediction to him. It's interesting. Yosef is a son increased, my dearly loved son is increased, my youngest son, turn to me. Yosef is my son who shall increase, my son who shall be Baruch. As a vine planted by the fountain of waters, 2 tribes will come forth from his stones. They shall receive a portion and inheritance. What I like about the Targum of Onkelos is this type of prophecy is a little bit clearer. And obviously, we know that 2 tribes come from Yosef. You got Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, so that's pretty accurate, actually. And I believe somewhere later on in Exodus or somewhere in the Torah it talks about the stones of Yosef. Could have swore. So verse 23, against whom men taking evil counsel reproached, and the archers pressed hard upon him. This is interesting. The mighty men of division, were bitter against him. They afflicted him and sorely grieved him, and his prophecy shall be fulfilled in them, because he was trustworthy to the law in secret and set his confidence firmly. Interesting. This is talking about Yosef. Okay. Men of division were bitter against him. His prophecy shall be fulfilled in them. He was trustworthy to the law in secret and set his confidence firmly. To me, this sounds like they're hinting to the fullness of the Gentiles here and talking about, the end times tribulation set apart ones. The Christianity would call it the tribulation saints, but it's probably talking about the set apart ones of the tribulation. I'm kind of guessing here because it's a very interesting prophecy I've never seen before, where it's referring to Yosef, but it's talking about his prophecy is fulfilled in them because he was trustworthy to the law in secret and set his confidence firmly. So it's talking about keeping the Torah, and it's talking about a prophecy being fulfilled in those that are afflicting him. So I don't know, it kind of sounds something about the tribulation, in my opinion. Verse 24, but their bow and arrows were mightily consumed, and the sinews of their arms were slackened by the hand of the mighty one of Jacob. There is he that strengthened Yasharal from the Elohim of your father. Okay, that was the Septuagint. And Caleb says, therefore was gold laid upon his arm, and the kingdom was strengthened and confirmed. This was to him from the mighty Elohim of Jacob, who by his word pastured the fathers and the children of the seed of Yasharal. So what I like about the Onkelos here, it shows that Yahusha is in this prophecy, is referring to by Yahuwah's word, Jacob, or I think it was, are we still talking about Joseph here? Yeah. Okay, we're still talking about Joseph. So by the word of Yahuwah, he pastured the fathers and the children of the seed of Yasharal. So it shows that Yahusha was involved there. Okay. Here we go in the Septuagint here. And my Elohim helped me and baruched you with the baraka of heaven from above, the baraka of the earth possessing all things because of the baraka of the breasts and of the womb. The Targum of Onkelos says, the word of the Elohim of my father, wonder who that's talking about, or the word of the Elohim, the word of the Elohim of your father shall be your helper. I wonder who that's talking about. And the all-sufficient shall Barak, Al Shaddai, all-sufficient one. Supposedly that's another possible meaning for Al Shaddai, the all-sufficient. And the all-sufficient shall Barak you with the barakas of the dew that descends from heaven above, with the barakas that spring from the depths of the earth beneath, with the barakas of your father and of your mother. Okay. The barakas of your father and your mother, it has prevailed above the baraka of the lasting mountains, And beyond the barakas of their everlasting hills, they shall be upon the head of Joseph and upon the head of the brothers whom he took the lead. And the baraka of your fathers shall be added upon the baraka with which my fathers Baruch me, with the princes who are of the world have desired. All of them shall be upon the head of Joseph and upon the man who was separated from his brothers. That's interesting. It's like talking about the Targum version of this verse is talking about the princes who are of the world. I wonder if it's talking about like the 10 kings, could be. It seems like more of like an end times type of thing. I know it's kind of referencing, Joseph, being cast out by his brothers, separated from his brothers. I get that, but just wondering, the princes who are of the world, that really sounds like the 10 kings to me. All right, so let me see here. Verse 27, Benjamin is a ravening wolf, shall eat still in the morning, and at evening he gives food. Benjamin in his hand will dwell the majesty or the magnificence, and in his possession will the set-apart place be builded. The reason I don't like saying Shekinah, I'll just kind of give like a short answer to this. I mean, really, if you look it up, the Kabbalah uses it to describe a feminine aspect of the Creator, so really it's just talking about the radiance that comes from Yahuwah, his esteem, okay? That's in context what it's talking about. But the word Shekinah I don't like to use because it refers to like this Gaia aspect of the Creator, this feminine divine. So I don't support that doctrine. So I don't, none of us here are support of the Kabbalah, so we're not going to be saying that term at all. Okay, so, and his possession will the set apart place be builded. In the morning and evening will the priest offer the oblation, and at evening divide the remaining portions of the residue of the set apart things. Interesting. This kind of sounds like Abraham. And this is talking about Benjamin. Huh. Interesting. I mean, Benjamin became the house, part of the southern house when the kingdom was divided. So that's kind of interesting. Interesting. All these, the 12 sons of Jacob and their father spoke these words to them, and he baruched them, and he baruched each of them according to his baraka. Okay, so the Caleb says, all these, the tribes of Yasharal, are 12, and this it is which their father spake to them, and baruched them according to the baraka of each man. Baruch he them. Then it says here, and he said to them, I am added to my people. You shall bury me with my fathers in the cave, which is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. And he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cavern, which is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. And this is something I want to make note of too, because some of our brothers and sisters, we to a fault, we want to defend the law of Moses to a fault. The Yahuwah's law before the law of Moses was a little different, okay? And I'm going to explain why. Because in this context, you can see Ephron the Hittite had a burial site that Abraham, their forefather, actually bought from him. So in a way, he's making a covenant with a Hittite. Abraham made a covenant with a Hittite, and it was not sin. So later on, when they get into the land of Canaan, mind you, after the 10 commandments are given, after the covenant of Mount Sinai is given, which would be now considered being in the law of Moses, okay? Yahuwah says, do not make covenants with the peoples of the land. And one of the tribes of the peoples of the land are the Hittites. So I just want to make that clear. There was a distinction between Yahuwah's law from the garden up until this point and what became known as the law of Moses, which was the law of Yahuwah, but had added commandments. I want to make that clear. So just so we don't get confused in stuff like this, because we'll see stuff that seems to be a contradiction in Genesis in certain areas where there's certain allowances, where there's not allowances after Genesis when we get into the law of Moses. So I just want to kind of help people out there understand why there's a difference here. So at this time period, it was not a sin for Abraham to basically have, buy something from Ephron the Hittite and to make, practically make a covenant with him, so he practically made an agreement with him to buy his land. So that's practically a covenant. So let me see here. So let's see here. It says the cavern which the double field over against Mamre, the land of Canaan, in the land of Canaan, which field, and the Targum on Kalos tells you right here, which field Abraham bought of Ephron the Hittite from an inheritance sepulcher. So basically when we get, grave plots for our family, this was like the origin of grave plots. And so verse 31, there they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife. There they buried Leah. Okay, pretty much the same thing in both versions there. Verse 32, the portion of the land and of the cave that was in it, of the sons of Heth. Okay, says the field and the cavern that is in it purchased of the sons of the Hittites. Okay. And Jacob ceased giving charges to his sons, and having lifted up his feet on the bed, he died and was gathered to his people. Jacob ceased to instruct his sons and drew his feet together in the bed and died and was gathered unto his people. So that was Genesis 49. And there was a lot in that chapter. There's a lot. So I'm going to give time for my sisters here, if they want to bring anything up or mention anything or had any questions. I know we went through a lot of different prophecies in that chapter, and so if there's anything they would like to ask before we move on.
I'm fine, brother. Thank
Okay. You. Yeah, no problem, sis. Okay. All right, so we're going to go to chapter 50, the last chapter of Genesis. We'll try to fit that in today. I think tomorrow, Yahuwah willing, we'll start Exodus. So let's see. It says, and Joseph fell upon his father. Let me make sure the shared screen's going. Sometimes it times out. Sure, it's back on the word software here. Okay. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept on him and kissed him. Same thing with the Kalos there. And Joseph commanded his servants, the embalmers, to embalm his father, and embalmers embalmed Yasharal. And this is another confusing thing too. Back then, the embalmers were just people that buried the dead. They weren't doing any weird rituals or anything. I know some people are going to see the word embalming and be like, oh, he was mummified. No, he wasn't mummified. I want to make that clear. He was not mummified, okay? Just because it says embalmed does not mean they were doing that to him. Trust me. I doubt that Joseph and his brothers would have allowed that to happen. I doubt it. Okay, so it says, and Targum says, and Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Yasharal. They fulfilled 40 days for him, so are the days of embalming numbered, and Egypt mourned for him 70 days. Wow, man. And 40 days were completed to him. For so also are completed the days of the embalmed, and the midstrites mourned for him 70 days. And when the days of mourning were past, Joseph spoke to the princes of Pharaoh, saying, if I have found favor in your sight, speak concerning me in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, okay, hold on, guys. Someone keeps calling me. I don't know why. These guys, come on. hold on. I'll have to call him back in a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. Didn't expect to have that call. All right. Let me just go back to where I was. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So we were about, I think, verse 5 here, verse 4. When the days of mourning were past, Joseph spoke to the princes of Pharaoh, saying, if I have found favor in your sight, speak concerning me in the ears of Pharaoh, saying. So, okay. Same thing. My father adjured me, meaning ordered me or commanded me, saying, in the sepulchre which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan, where you shall bury me, now then I will go up and bury my father and return again. My father ordered me, saying, behold, I die in my sepulchre which I have prepared for me in the land of Canaan. There shall you bury me, and now let me go up, I pray, and I will bury my father and return. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, go up, bury your father as he constrained you to swear. Okay. Same thing, adjured you. Okay. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and all the servants of Pharaoh went up with him, and the elders of his house and the elders of the land of Egypt. Mitzrayim, same thing. Okay. And all the household of Joseph and his brothers and all the house of his father and his kindred, and they left behind the sheep and the oxen in the land of Goshen. Okay. Now that's interesting. So the Targum makes it a little bit more specific what they mean by the kindred, only the children. So Septuagint would have it believe that he left the whole family back, because kindred could be, any part of the family. Your next to kin could be anyone, not just your children. So I kind of like how the Targum is a little bit more specific. So it says, only the children of the flocks and the cattle they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him also chariots and horsemen, and there was a very great company. Okay. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and they bewailed him with a great, very sore lamentation. He made mourning for his father 70 days. Now, another thing to note is nowhere in Scripture are people mourning for people years and years later. And unfortunately, our culture has kind of made allowances for people to grieve for people beyond the extent that they should be grieving for people. Sometimes it goes crazy. I've actually had family that, they will not, it's almost like they don't move on with their lives after a loss of someone in the family. Like they get so attached to someone that they stay in like a depressed state. And it kind of makes sense why you're only allowed to grieve for someone a certain allotted time. So it actually makes sense. Like most of the time in Scripture, you'll see here, like it says 70 days. Moses, I think they only mourned for him like a month. Okay, so I think Yahuwah puts that in place for a reason. Or not even 70 days, 7 days. Wow. Okay, my bad. It says 7, not 70. Whoops. And they came threshing floor, which is beyond Jordana, and lamented there, lamentation great and very strong, and he made a mourning for his father 7 days. So I mean, the Hebraic way of mourning is a lot quicker, and I think Yahuwah had it the right way, in my opinion. So let's see here, verse 11. And the inhabitants of the land of Canaan saw the mourning at the floor of Atad and said, this is a great mourning to the Egyptians. Therefore, he called its name the mourning of Egypt, which is beyond Jordan. And the inhabitants of the land of Canaan saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad and said, this is a mighty mourning of the Mitzrites. Therefore, its name is called Abel Mitzrayim. That's interesting. Abel Mitzrayim. Okay. Which is beyond Jordana. Okay. And thus did his sons to him, and his sons did as he commanded them. And his sons carried him up in the land of Canaan and buried him in the double cave which the cave Abraham bought for possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. Okay. And Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and those that had gone up with him to bury his father. And Joseph returned into Mitzrayim, and he and his brothers, all who went with him to bury his father after he had buried his father. Okay, so they're back going to Egypt. And when the brothers of Joseph saw that their father was dead, they said, lest at any time Joseph remember evil against us and repay to us all the evils which we have done against him. Okay. And they came to Joseph and said, your father ordered before his death, saying, so I kind of want, how does Yahuwah look upon this? Now they're lying to their brother? The heck? Now they're saying, our father ordered us? We don't see any orders like this. And they made visitation to Joseph, saying, your father commanded before his death, saying, thus shall you to Joseph forgive them their injustice and their sin, for as much as they have done you evil, and now pardon the unrighteousness of the servants of the Elohim of your father. And Joseph wept while they spoke to him. Okay, so again, we don't see that in scripture, though. We don't see that actually being ordered by their dad. So again, I don't know. I wouldn't trust them, man. Joseph is very forgiving. I would forgive them, but I would kind of, keep my eyes on them at the same time. I would love them because they're my brothers, but I don't know, man. After so many times someone lies to you, you kind of lose trust in them, And they came to him and said, these are your servants. And his brothers came and fell before him and said, behold, we are your servants. And Joseph said to him, fear not, for I am Elohim's. And Joseph said to them, fear not, for I fear Yahuwah. Wow. Okay, I like that better. Right away, because I, as anyone knows that watches our channel and knows our group, we like to honor the Father's name. Okay, Elohim or Theos is not a name. Okay. So I would have to go with the Targum on that one. You took counsel against me for evil, but Elohim took counsel for me for good, that it might be as to the day much people might be fed. When you thought evil against me before Yahuwah, it was intended for Tob to be done as at this day for the preservation of much people. And he said to them, fear not, I will maintain you and your families and comfort them. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Okay, I will sustain you and your children. And he consoled them and spake consolation in their heart. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his brothers and all the family of his father. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph dwelt in Mitzrayim, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. Okay, see here. He and his father's house. Joseph saw the children of Ephraim to the third generation, and the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born on the sides of Joseph. The Targum says, and Joseph saw of Ephraim 3 sons. Also the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born, and Joseph brought up. Okay. Whom Joseph brought up. Okay. And Joseph spoke to his brothers, saying, I die, and Elohim will surely visit you, and will bring you out of this land to the land concerning which Elohim swore to our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Targum says, and Joseph said to his brothers, I die, but Yahuwah, remembering, will remember you, and bring you up from this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph adjured the sons of Yasharel, meaning ordered, saying, "At the visitation which Elohim shall visit you, then you shall carry up my bones hence with you." If I remember, this is also a prophecy that gets fulfilled around the time of the Exodus, if I'm not mistaken, when it's talking about Yahuwah visiting them. And Yosef adjured the sons of Yasharal, saying, "Yahuwah remembering will remember you, and you shall carry my bones up from here." And Yosef died aged 110 years, and they prepared his corpse and put him in a coffin in Egypt. Also, I wanted to make a mention, remember, the 120 years in Genesis 6, okay, we start seeing that they're at that point now, and they're a little bit even less than that expectation. Okay, so Yosef died 110 years, okay? So basically the new age expectancy is already being fulfilled here. So, and again, so it says, the son of 110 years, they embalmed him and laid him in an ark in Mitzrayim. That's interesting. Ark, coffin, yeah, same thing. That's pretty interesting. So that's the end of chapter 50. Pretty much that chapter was self-explanatory. It was all about the burial of Yosef. You had a nice reconciliation with his brothers. And again, if I was him, I would be a little cautious though, because they're already lying to him, saying that their father promised, told them to order him not to hold anything against them. So again, I don't know. That's a little mistrustworthy in my opinion. But yeah, so that was the end of Genesis there. So we see this journey now going on. Now we're ending the dynasty of Egypt that was, very nice to the Israelites and friends with the Israelites. And you're going to see, as we, Yahuwah willing, Yahusha willing, tomorrow in Exodus chapter 1, you're going to see a huge difference between the two pharaohs. Huge difference. So anyway, thank you for joining us. I do want to actually give the floor to my sister Sadie, my sister River, if they have anything else to maybe share or add, or any comments they would like to say before we end the recording.
Yes, brother, I really appreciate these studies. Thank you.
You're welcome, sis. All right, so I guess if that's it, thank you for all joining us. Please stay tuned. Yahuwah and Yahusha willing, we'll be back tomorrow, starting Exodus chapter 1. Okay, so, and again, don't be so tripped up by the term embalm. It just means to bury. It's not necessarily referring to mummification. We tend to get older words in these translations and apply our modern bias of things. And we just read the other day, like, for example, in the King James Dictionary, divination meant to prophesy in the old British language, to foretell future events. It depends what you're using for divination. And so that's also something I just wanted to show people, to explain this, because I know brothers and sisters are going to see this in the book of Genesis, around chapter 41 or after, where Joseph uses, that word is being used for Joseph prophesying what Yahuwah gives him to prophesy. So I just want to show them that it's not evil of itself, you could say, the word divination. It depends what type of prophesying. And, so let me see here if I can just find it real quick. Okay, so Deuteronomy, I think it's chapter 18, verse 10 here. So we're on Deuteronomy. Let's scroll up here to chapter 18, verse 10. And this is the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, which is a modern version of the Greek Orthodox Bible, which has the Septuagint for the Old Testament. Let me make sure I'm on the right chapter here, because the chapter numbers are always, see, it's still on Genesis for some weird reason. Yeah, okay, there we go. Deuteronomy 18:10. Okay. So we scroll down here, it will say, there shall not be found among you one purging his son or daughter in the fire, using oracles for divination. Now, if you go to that Greek word, oracles, it's referring spells and charms. So what it's saying is that no one among you shall use magic for telling the future. That's what it's actually saying. Not that it's saying you can't prophesy at all or that you can't divine at all, because actually divine just means to prophesy. It's an old British word that pretty much means just to prophesy, any type of telling the future. So like Daniel told the future because Yahuwah gave him a vision. He told him the interpretation of a vision. So basically divination means to get knowledge of future events from a higher power. Yahuwah is a higher power. So it's important to understand that, to understand the British language and the older English language, that just because we see a word that we have a stigma against, we have to go back into the earlier dictionaries and actually have to see what the original meaning of the word. For another example, unicorn. Unicorn's not a mystical horse, okay? Unicorn was in the King James Bible. If you go to the King James dictionary that I can give you a link to, okay, says unicorn is any one-horned animal. That's all it means. So again, we need to be careful of using modern definitions for words that pretty much go all the way back to the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s. So we need to be very careful about that. So anyway, thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, all of our brothers and sisters. Yeah, go ahead, Sadie. I see you unmuted yourself.
Okay. Yeah, so then a unicorn, when you say one-horned animal, is a unicorn bad or is it not considered bad? Is it man-made? Is it been spliced?
It's just,
Or, you know what I mean?
it's a general animal, a one-horned rhino. According to that King James dictionary website I gave you guys a link to, if you look up under U and, click on the U section and go down the list, and unicorns in there in that dictionary. So you can actually see what it really means, what it meant originally. It means they say most likely it was a one-horned rhinoceros. Okay, so the world has changed meanings of things. For another example, where you see replenish. Replenish back in the 1800s meant to fill once, not to refill. See, this is important to understand, because then when you get with the gap theory and this stuff and that stuff, and people going off of weird doctrines because they're going off of modern definitions of words. And the same thing with the Strong's. Sometimes the Strong's is honoring a modern definition of something. Like we were talking about that word divination the other day. And generally speaking, it just means to prophesy. So, that's why the Septuagint says, do not use spells for divination, for telling the future, for prophesying. So, and that's important to know, because you will see in the book of Genesis, it says, don't you know that I divine? Joseph himself saying that in the King James. Okay, so that's why we need to be careful, because a lot of Bibles still use that term divine, and we need to know what that actually means in a general sense, what it actually means, to understand what it's saying in context. So the pagans would use spells, witchcraft, for telling the future, if that makes any sense, for prophesying. Their type of prophesying would include dark arts and stuff that's forbidden according to Deuteronomy 18. So that's what Yahuwah is saying. Do not use that stuff to prophesy. And you can find that in, the Witch of Endor, in the story of King Saul and all that, they would try to tell future events by talking to the dead. So that's what Yahuwah is actually talking about. The tarot cards and stuff like that. Don't do that. Don't go to a tarot card reader in the modern terminology sense. So,
And isn't it odd that most of your tarot card readers and all that they're basically coming from one part, is it not Armenians, it is
a lot
what
of
is it?
islands, they're
Yeah, Turkish, are they Turkish or what is it?
like
Because they're all almost the same.
a lot from like Barbados because the voodoo came from the islands. So it comes from other countries. A lot of it, like there's probably some Hindu tarot card readers and stuff like that. It usually comes from pagan cultures, that type of practice. So usually it probably came along from the islands, though. From what I've seen, the practice of voodoo is still practiced in certain parts of like third world countries and stuff like that, and like the islands where you got probably the Rastafarians and all that. So that kind of came over to our culture, to the American culture, because we're just a huge melting pot of everyone else's culture. But probably Israelites had to deal with it too in the Middle East. You had the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Girgashites. They all practiced that stuff. That's why Yahuwah says, when I bring you into this land, don't do the abominations they do. He's referring to the inhabitants of that land they're supposed to utterly destroy. And so the giants actually practiced all that nasty witchcraft stuff, all the fortune telling and all that, because they got it from, their forefathers, the original giants, and the giants got it from their dads, the fallen angels. They were teaching that to mankind in the pre-flood world. So technically, if you go farther back, almost every nation on the earth at the time of the Tower of Babel was doing that type of stuff. And so Yahuwah had only one nation. He only had one that was following him. Every other nation was doing that stuff. That's why he warns them, don't imitate that stuff. I'm taking them out of this land because of those abominations. Don't be doing that stuff. And unfortunately, they ended up doing that stuff. And that's why you got Kabbalistic Judaism. That's why you got, the Kabbalah and all that, and unfortunately they inherited that stuff. They didn't slaughter man, woman, and child and everything of those giants, of the Girgashites, the Hittites, the Jebusites. And to their fault, Yahuwah warned them, if you don't do that, if you start making covenants with these nations, it's going to be a snare to you. And look what happened. It became a snare. And so Yahuwah actually never wanted them to have forced labor with those tribes. He actually wanted them to be utterly destroyed. And they try to meet Yahuwah halfway or whatever, and got forced labor on whoever was left that they didn't utterly destroy. And it was a snare to them. Yahuwah was warning them, this is what's going to happen. You're going to worship their gods. You're going to do this evil type of stuff. That's why Yahuwah warns them even back then, do not worship me the way these other pagan peoples worship their gods. And that's in Deuteronomy 12:4. He's telling them that before they're even getting into the land, because he knows their evil heart. He knows they're gonna look at these other nations like, oh, that's cool traditions. Let us include that. Like the way today we do Christmas and Easter and Halloween. It's the same thing. It's really the same thing. We're like, oh yeah, look at all these nations around us. Let us serve Yahuwah the way they serve their gods. It's really the same thing. And so that...
Wow. Well, because like on Disneyland, with that movie Hunchback from Notre Dame, I seen the gypsies were there, and I thought they were like more like from Romania, or there was a culture of them where they came from. But I guess it's all over, so it could be even to the four corners of the earth, right? Because everybody got scattered, and or no, is it more towards?
Yeah, they got scattered. They got scattered. You had some going to Greece. Greece came.
Okay.
You had Rome coming. That Tower of Babel, because pretty much everyone was on one land back then, and even it kind of hints at the tectonic plates, what they call Pangea or whatever. it kind of hints that in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided, meaning that the continent, at one point, the continents were all connected. So around the time of Peleg, that descendant of Noah, the continents probably started getting divided because of the tectonic plates. Some of science is actually scriptural. The problem is when they start going into this whole heliocentric nonsense. But some of what's taught in science is actually true about the tectonic plates. And at one point, the Earth started getting countries divided. At one point, there was something called Pangea, where you had all the continents and all the countries as one huge supercontinent. And that's probably the remnants of Atlantis, most likely. And whatever wasn't sunk. And that's probably why it was a lot easier for the earth to get flooded so quickly, because everything was connected. And, once the waters came, the Atlantis sunk down, and whatever would have been left over of that was a supercontinent is what, scientists today called Pangea. So pretty much the earth got divided. So, plus the fact you had the Tower of Babel, which, different people established different nations. You got the person Mitzrayim finding Egypt, naming Egypt after himself, and so on and so forth. So, hopefully that explains that, because, it's geography. No problem, sis. All right, so thank you guys for joining us for the recording. For viewers and listeners, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it on the comment section. That's pretty much it. That's all I can say. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Shalom to our brothers and sisters. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.